Well, I mean, obviously, like, Megamix isn't even that good to begin with. No, please, I'm just kidding, please. Do not leave the video, do not dislike, no! Listen, I can't speak for the entire community, but back in the year 2016, when Rhythm Heaven Megamix released in America and Europe, all over Discord, YouTube, Reddit, most of the fanbase agreed on the fact that the series was probably over. And don't get me wrong, there were some believers here and there. Every time there was a Nintendo Direct, I had my clown nose and wig prepared, and every time I got hurt. But if you thought about it, it just made sense that the series would end there. With over 100 minigames and with it being a compilation and a celebration of the series as a whole, which is even lopsided in the Japanese name, the best plus, Megamix would be the perfect curtain call for the series, and the final remix, the perfect goodbye letter. In fact, rumors of Megamix being the last entry were so strong that in 2017, one of the producers of the series, Yoshio Sakamoto, had to say out loud during an interview that it wasn't the case.
No, it's not dead. We generally don't comment on those kind of rumors, but I don't remember us ever saying it was over. Generally speaking, if there's an opportunity, a motivation, a need, we consider all opportunities and leave the door open. That's all I can say.
And only a couple of years later, a fan asked Sunku about a new game for the Switch, and this is what he replied. And despite that, the years went on, and there was no new game. Not even a deluxe version of Megamix, with the missing minigames from previous entries. Nothing. The series pretty much survived thanks to WarioWare cameos, PNGs in Smash Ultimate, spiritual successors, and the many projects led on by its passionate fanbase. But, as it turns out, miracles do actually happen from time to time. Translation note: Groove in Japan is called Miracle Stars. Rhythm Heaven Groove, the first entry of the Rhythm Heaven series in 10 years, was officially announced in March of 2025. And to say that the fanbase was excited could be an understatement. And fun fact, it was revealed in the only direct I couldn't watch live. I was working and my phone started to rumble a lot, and when I checked my notifications it was like this.
Check the news, it doesn't matter what channel.
But now that it's been some time, there's a question that comes to my mind from time to time. Considering all these things I've said about Megamix being the perfect ending, can a new, regular Rhythm Heaven live up to all the hype? Will it be enough? As a matter of fact, I think we got a very nice view of the possibilities thanks to the sister series of Rhythm Heaven, WarioWare. But before I begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Chilo el Muñeco de Nieve. It's a YouTube channel that made that comparison in the first place in a video, and that inspired me. If you know Spanish, I really recommend checking it out. WarioWare got its own Rhythm Heaven Megamix in the form of WarioWare Gold, a game released for the Nintendo 3DS in 2018 that was a compilation of the best of the series, as it took benefit of all its possibilities. It had touch controls, gyro, even microphone, but unlike Rhythm Heaven, it actually got a follow-up, well, two. WarioWare Get It Together released in 2021, and it was, well, actually kind of a departure from a traditional WarioWare. Not a huge one, since the microgames were still the main point of the game, but in this one you actually controlled the entire cast of WarioWare, and each of them had their own controls and set of skills. So it became kind of a platform/action game, mixed with its original core of quick minigames. It had its detractors, but I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like it, a lot, as I always thought that the WarioWare cast deserved to be more fleshed out. WarioWare Move It in 2023. Gee, WarioWare, how come you can have two sweet games? This one was as traditional WarioWare as you can get, being a spiritual successor to WarioWare Smooth Moves for the Wii, one of the most beloved entries of the series. It focused entirely on all the possibilities of the Joy-Cons to offer a classic WarioWare experience. So, those were the two paths that the WarioWare series followed, innovation and tradition, and if you ask me, I think Rhythm Heaven Groove will choose the latter. Why? Well, I think it's due to various factors. In the first place, I feel like one of the reasons WarioWare has changed its formula so much is because the series went through a bit of a burnout. And don't get me wrong, I love the WarioWare series. In fact, I knew of Rhythm Heaven because of WarioWare. But they released a lot of games in a very short period of time.
Like 8 WarioWare games in 7 years.
And this is probably the reason why the series, much like Rhythm Heaven, went through a hiatus for a while. If you count smooth moves like the last traditional WarioWare of the 2000s, it took 12 years to get a new one in the form of gold. Not only that, but being focused on the gimmicks of its console was always an important part of the WarioWare series. But these two things don't apply to Rhythm Heaven. Precisely because the series has been dormant for so long, I think it still feels very fresh. Come on, we haven't had a new game for more than 10 years. And the fact that the Rhythm Heaven series has inspired so many rhythm games lately proves to me that there is a very high demand for a new traditional game. To me, it feels like the creators kind of felt a similar burnout to the WarioWare series.
You could tell in Megamix.
After all, Rhythm Heaven got 4 games in 9 years.
5 if you count Rhythm Tengoku Arcade.
And that, along with other things like Sunku's health problems, may have been the reason the creators felt like the series needed to breathe a bit more before a new game. And regarding the gimmicks, well, that has never been Rhythm Heaven's main thing, aside from the edge due to its touch controls. The series has always had an emphasis on simplicity.
They'd rather stick to buttons.
And from what we've seen, I'm very confident that it will remain the same. But what about the content? A traditional Rhythm Heaven game has around 50 games, and a bunch of extra modes, and endless games. But Megamix also have that and 100 minigames, the double, along with a lot of extras that really increased its replayability. The challenge train, skill stars, an actual score in the minigames, and even if it got a bit of hate, an actual story. But now I gotta be honest with you. To me, Rhythm Heaven TS and Fever already have a pretty good amount of content. In fact, I'd say that every Rhythm Heaven game improved greatly upon its predecessor in this department. Tengoku was probably the weakest there, which is understandable being the first game, but TS and especially Fever were very strong. And in fact, I'm going to use Fever as an example of why its length was so good, even without 100 minigames.
Great difficulty balance.
Its rating system was not as exigent as DS, but it's definitely a challenging game and it has some good difficulty curves. I'd say Remix 2 and Remix 3 are excellent wake-up callers. It feels like you do really earn your medals, unlike Megamix. The only thing I feel Fever lacks is more sequels.
Excellent side content.
There's your usual rhythm toys, 4 extra regular minigames which were remade from Tengoku,
5 if you count Nightwalk,
and also a lot of endless games, both solo and multiplayer, which, by the way, brings me to the fact that there's even multiplayer variants of regular rhythm games that you can play alone, don't worry.
Except Bossa Nova unless you're good. A reason to 100% the game.
Listen, its execution may be flawed, but the idea of a literal, endless, and randomized remix is amazing. But more importantly, I love that it gives you a reason to actually get all the perfects, and I find that awesome. Not even Megamix had that.
Quality.
Okay. This one is completely subjective, I admit.
Plot twist. This video was just an excuse to gush over Fever because it's my favorite game.
But to me, Fever has the best remixes of the entire series, and quite possibly most of my favorite minigames too. So, if Groove just gave us a good amount of minigames and remixes of similar quality, I'd be over the moon already. Sure, Fever didn't have 100 minigames, but going for all the perfects and completing all of this will still take you a lot of time.
Unless you are a rhythm god.
Let's be real, Groove will never have as many minigames as Megamix, but I think it has a similar amount of quality of content to Fever, but with some of the quality of life features from Megamix, it may be a really strong game. And well, I can think of some features that would increase its replayability. Personally, I like that most of the minigames,
if not all of them,
got sequels, since they are easy to develop. And one thing I really like is that it had a feature similar to the Wario Cup from Get It Together. For those that don't know, every week there was a new competition in which you had to beat a series of microgames in certain conditions, similar to the challenge train. But the best part was that it had online capabilities and you could compete to see who gets the highest scores with your friends and the entire world. Something similar but applied to Rhythm Heaven could be very fun and give you an incentive to keep on playing. But I digress, that may be better for another video. In any case, yeah, I think that Groove will never try to top Megamix because it doesn't need it. It will be another entry of the Rhythm Heaven series and that's great news already. And I'm very confident about the game being good, especially since we know that both Kota, Keuchi and Sunku are back, and they were always very passionate about the series. I'm sure they'll give their 100%. Personally, I'm so very hyped to listen to the new tracks. It's been so long since Megamix. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. I know this was kind of messy, especially since I have never done a video of this kind, but I just wanted to yap about Groove and Rhythm Heaven in general. I'm very excited about it and I hope we get some news soon. If you like the video, I may do another one in the future. Please let me know.
In the meantime, play Bits and Bobs is really good. Thank you, love you, see you, goodbye, bye.